My privilege to introduce Michael Kolesnikov, who will be presenting today. Michael is pursuing his PhD here at OHSU. He's an advanced practitioner at the Department of Surgery with Trauma and Critical Care. He completed his BSN, MSN, and then his nurse practitioner from San Jose, and then came to us and then has done advanced certification in
adult gerontology, acute care nurse practitioner.
In adult gerontology and acute care nurse practitioning. And today he's going to talk to us a little bit about the feasibility of using machine learning for clinical decision support to optimize transfusion practice in trauma care. And take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mohan. First of all, I would like to do some acknowledgements. I would like to say thank you to my dissertation advisory committee, Dr. Vishnu Mohan, Dr. Karen Eden, Dr. Martin Schreiber, Dr. Steven Bedrick, and Dr. Pete Hepstra. Also, huge thank you to faculty and staff and students of the DMICE, because we've done some tough times, and you all helped me. Thank you so much. My topic deals a lot with trauma and shock, and the reason I chose it is trauma is the leading cause of death in the age group between 1 and 44 years old. And we have linked shock to the blood loss a little over 100 years ago. So in 1919, a groundbreaking study came out, and it linked loss of 40% of blood volume was linked to onset of hemorrhagic shock. Today, we consider that class 4 by modern standards because we kind of moved a little bit in our understanding of shock and how it represents. Hemorrhagic shock is still a big problem. It accounts for over 80% of deaths in the operating room and over 50% of deaths in the first 24 hours after the injury. People have been thinking about blood transfusion. How do I do that?
You can't see the slides.
From the little white.
There it is.
Oh,
Perfect.
sorry about that. All right.
The sheet looks very calm.
Yes. Yes.
How
That's
it was
actually the thing. Yeah, so people have been thinking about blood transfusion since very early time, like prehistoric. And they've been attributing blood some special properties like eternal youth, and it kind of carries over even into nowadays. Now, first attempt of the blood transfusion was done in 1667, and it was done at the same time in 2 different countries, in England and in France. And both times, they used mentally ill individual, and they used sheep's blood, and both patients died. So since that, for a couple hundred years, church has interfered and they banned the blood transfusion. And that's been going on up until middle 19th century, when people started to think about blood again and started to do experiments with the blood transfusions. They have used blood transfusions. The practitioners started to use it roughly in 1850. For a variety of conditions, including mental illness, including tuberculosis. So somewhere hit or miss. And the biggest hit or miss came out from our lack of understanding how blood actually works. And scientific understanding of blood transfusion came up in about 1904, in the beginning of the 20th century, when Landsteiner found the types of blood. That was a groundbreaking discovery. And then we have made the acceptance of blood transfusion chart. So some blood can be accepted, but it depends on your blood type. And we consider like 0, O negative blood is a universal donor. Still, even with our understanding today, transfusion reaction is a big thing. We are estimating about between 3 to 4 million of transfusions in 2013. And roughly we have about 11 million donors, and 14 million of blood units have been transfused in 2019. According to some researchers, and this is the article I have on the bottom, roughly 20% have some reaction to the blood transfusion. It's high. They considered even smallest needy things as a reaction to the blood transfusion. Most of the researchers would agree it's more about like 5%. Still, about 1 in 200,000 cases is a lethal reaction to the blood transfusion. We also have a blood shortage in the United States today. So blood supply has been declining since 2013, and that raises the cost of blood. 1 unit of packed red blood cells is over $200 right now, and 1 unit of platelets is over $500. Some researchers, and this is the article on the bottom, believe 92% of blood transfused patients received at least 1 unit of blood product unnecessary. And this is why I'm interested in this topic. So this is a case of, and this is taken from the open media, so we are not breaking any HIPAA laws or anything like that. So this is the case of Springfield police officer Aaron Person, who was on duty answering a call, and he was shot in his face. He had struggled, he had traumatic brain injury, multiple bone fractures in the face, and he had lost a significant amount of blood. He was rushed to the hospital, and he actually required over 20 units of blood transfusion. This is not something unusual. Lots of people I have seen required massive blood transfusion protocol to be implemented, and this is just like one of the our own things in the OHSU. We got a picture of used units of blood transfused to 1 patient, and the system we have right now is we actually have a massive transfusion runner, a real bloody individual who runs from emergency room to the blood bank, trying to get the blood on time to the patient. If my research is successful, I hope we will be able to identify patients in the need of blood transfusion earlier than right now and prevent waste of blood products. And eventually we will save more lives. Before I started to work on this project, I was thinking, well, there are 2 types of prediction used right now. Ones are simple and ones are complex. And although I did not see them used in the actual emergency department, but I thought, well, we probably use the simple ones. So, and the simplest of them all is a shock index. So that calls for a division of heart rate by blood pressure. Normally, about like everybody who is sitting here, textbook normal will be your heart rate is 72, your blood pressure is about 120. People have difficulties dividing double-digit number by triple-digit numbers under stress. And period, just difficult. So another assessment of blood consumption was it takes into consideration mechanism of injury, systolic blood pressure, heart rate again. So most of them deal with something simple. More complex are used mostly they are used for research because nobody uses them in the actual trauma care to determine if this patient needs the blood transfusion. When I was doing interviews of trauma surgeons, what they told me is we do take into consideration mechanism of injury, and then we are looking at the actual blood pressure and heart rate. As they approach each other, that's the time we start the blood transfusion. So my research question and methodology is I'm trying to find feasibility of using machine learning for clinical decision support to optimize transfusion practices in trauma care. And I propose sequential linear mixed method study for that. So my specific aims are, number 1, I would like to understand how the decision to do the blood transfusion is made. My aim number 2 is I would like to build several machine learning models capable of predictive analytics. And number 3 aim is I would like to evaluate those models to see how they work. So for the specific aim number 1, and I have already started working on it, I divided into 3 steps. In the step 1, I would like to identify how patients are identified for the blood transfusion. Number 2 is how we decide to start the transfusion. And number 3, how we decide to stop the blood transfusion. When I looked at the different transfusion, different method identifying patients who need the blood transfusion, I found out about 30 different variables, and there are over 24 of them. So at 24, I looked, and the 25th, I said it's not. So there are also articles which review them all, and it's about 30 different variables used. If you would divide them into categories, so some of them are definitely vital signs. Systolic blood pressure and heart rate is the most common ones. Then also changes in the vital signs over time. Patient characteristics. And before I started this research, well, I thought, well, maybe they are all important, but not all of them are important the same way. So for example, age is important, height and weight, not so much. Also lab values, hemoglobin and basic cells were number ones. Diagnostical imaging values. So people who had long bone fractures, like femur and femurs, and pelvic fractures, they do have a more often require blood transfusion than not. And also use of medications such as beta blockers and blood thinners. The works trying to predict the need for the blood transfusion in a patient population had been done before. And this is a recent article which came out, machine learning-based predictions. So what they did is they used logistic regression, random forest, and neural networks trying to identify the patients. More into that, when I looked in this article, they excluded patients who did not have hemoglobin and hematocrit rate values. Why I think this is a problem? When patient is acutely injured, they lose lots of blood. This blood is the same blood as they have inside of their body. So if you're going to measure the hemoglobin right at the site of the blood loss, hemoglobin in the body will be exactly the same. It takes a little bit of time for the body to do hemodilution, and we also give fluids during the transportation of the patient, and that also accounts for the hemodilution as well. So the values of the hemoglobin is lagging behind the actual clinical picture. So we have to be able to predict and identify those patients who need the blood transfusion way before the hemoglobin drop shows up on the medical chart. Other than that, they did show this task was possible by their machine learning models, and but they did have difficulties predicting massive blood transfusion because this is a trauma usually, and they were and I was not clear how many trauma patients they actually had on their list. I would assume most of them have been excluded. Now, looking at my specific aim number 1, what I am doing is I'm going to ask clinicians, and I'm asking them already about their approach to the blood transfusion. So this is a phenomenological study. So I'm concentrated on clinicians' experience in one phenomena, blood transfusion in trauma patients. I'm using 2 strategies. This is an exploration, so I'm learning the new information, and this is verification. So I'm trying to verify my findings as I go about it. I'm trying to establish credibility, looking at the similar researchers and other data, and also doing triangulation, and I'll talk about it in a second. And as far as the confirmability, I'm trying to make sure the conclusion is actually based in the data, not on the data I have collected. So about the sampling, you can make an argument. This is a convenient sampling because I'm going for the people I actually know. I started there. You can also make an argument this is a snowballing because I do ask people for referrals to other practitioners who do the same thing. I would like to say this is also purposive sampling because I'm limiting my my subjects to people who are making the decision to transfuse or not to transfuse the blood in the trauma care in the specific place, trauma bay, as soon as the patient arrives from the ambulance. So I'm doing two things right now. So I did the online questionnaire, and I have about 13 people have responded. I'm also doing recorded interviews, and I have done 2 batches of them. As I'm going through the interviews, I'm doing coding, and I'm looking for the common themes, and I'm hoping to achieve saturation soon. Saturation means there are no new themes come up in the interviews. And I'm doing triangulation too. So these are the results of my, like most important results of my questionnaire. And they do show mechanism of injury and systolic blood pressure are the most important things. And as I'm going into the semi-structured interviews, I'm finding out more about the relationship between systolic blood pressure and other variables. For example, some of the respondents told me age is important. And the way age affects the blood pressure is as we go as we grow older, our systolic blood pressure has a tendency to rise. So for somebody who is injured and 18 years old, their normal blood pressure will be about 120/80. When they come to the trauma bay, if their blood pressure 90 or below systolic blood pressure, we will be thinking about shock and blood transfusion. For somebody who is 75, their normal blood pressure will be something about 140/90. And as they are coming into the trauma bay, the threshold rises. So we will start thinking about blood transfusion when the systolic blood pressure is about 110. As I'm doing this interview and online questionnaire, I'm trying to do the confirmation. If the method 1 confirms the finding from the method 2, this will be called triangulation, and I hope I'm on the right track then. I also did some preliminary workup, and I used one of the databases to see if there is a correlation between blood transfusion and systolic blood pressure. And it came up, so as the blood pressure goes down to 110 approximately, the rate of the units transfused to these patients raises significantly. What I'm trying to achieve in all of this activity, I'm trying to construct the decision domain. So if my variables, the ones I discovered to be important for the blood transfusion decision, will be converted into dimensions, and those dimensions will define the database, I should be able to see those patients who need the blood transfusion, don't need the blood transfusion, maybe those who need the massive blood transfusion, and that's the goal of my aim number 1. My aim number 2 is building machine learning tools for predictive analytics. And what I'm hoping to get there is using the database I constructed from my aim 1 to be able to predict any blood transfusion, massive, or using regression, maybe finding out the amount of blood needed for any specific patient. My second type of data I'm planning to use is called time series, and this is a repetitive measurement of the same variable over a period of time. There are a couple of places where this is done in medicine, and one of them is in the ambulance when the patient is being delivered from the site of the injury to the emergency room. They record systolic blood pressure and heart rate. Also, if we are able to identify the patient, but we don't have the blood available at the site, that might be a problem for us as well. So my second time series, I'm trying to find out if I I will be able to predict demand in the blood products for the future date. And last but not least is I would like to use visual data, trying to analyze it and see if, how that corresponds with the blood transfusion. So choosing the algorithm. So one of them is I'm planning to use multi-layer perceptron, and I'm going to talk about it in a second. There are also for time series, I was looking at there is a statistical type of data analysis called least absolute shrinkage and selection operator, LASSO. We also have a recurrent neural network, and that currently uses LSTM, long short-term memory cells, and transformers. And last, for the analyzing the visual data, I'm planning to use convolutional neural network. Now, let's dive into that. So imagine you are working at the Cornell Aeronautic Lab, and it's 1957. And the person next to you, his name is Frank Rosenblatt. So he is working on something, and if you ask him what he is doing, he would tell you, look at the neuron. I'm using the cutting edge knowledge about neuron and how it works to make the thinking machine. So how does the neuron work? Neuron has a few dendrites. They go in and they bring the data to the neuron. Something happens in the neuron, and then it either fires or it doesn't fire on the axon end. So, and what Rosenblatt came up with is a perceptron. It's a simple one-layer perceptron. Instead of the dendrites, it uses data, the data points coming in, and then there is a mathematical formula. Each data point has weight and bias. So it's multiplied or amplified or not amplified, and there's a bias added to that. And at the end, the neuron either fires or doesn't fire. So that was the hype peak of the artificial intelligence in 1957, until Marvin Minsky and Seymour Papert came up with a paper in 1969, which showed perceptron has limitations. And until then, the money were flowing, the defense was interested. We thought we were going to be able to translate things and do all the wonderful things with the artificial intelligence. But it showed simple perceptron is capable only to separate linearly separable data, as you can see it on the picture, and it does only binary classifications, white or black, yes or no. There is no 50 shades of gray in between. And that paper caused the AI winter, the first one, and the artificial intelligence became bad word combination. Now, in 1986, what happened is, and that was not the first time, but people invented backpropagation. What the backpropagation does, it looks at how we arrive to the answer, and it calculates the error. And then using calculus chain rule, it backpropagates weights and biases in the perceptron, but it has to be multi-layer perceptron. So, and then by adjusting the weight, it helps the machine to learn data in a different way. So this is why I'm going to use the multi-layer perceptron. It uses backpropagation. It's capable of solving complex nonlinear problems, and it also can be augmented by additional machine learning protocols. Specific steps I'm going to use is I'm going to use the features discovered in the first step. I'm going to use Keras Python library, and this is the machine learning tool, which I hope you'll be able to learn the need for the blood transfusion, massive blood transfusion, and using regression, maybe even predict specific amount of blood needed for transfusion. The data set I'm going to use for this is I have been working in a trauma service, and we are working on one of the articles right now. So we looked at the data from 2017 until this year, and we have identified 630 trauma victims who received the blood transfusion. The topic of this paper is we are comparing whole blood and component use of blood transfusion, we came up with the idea it's the same. It doesn't make a big difference, but if I'm able to use this data set and I will be able to add matching patients 2-to-1 by injury severity score, mechanism of injury, and age, I'm going to have about 1900 plus or minus patients in this data set. I can say this is not much, so this is a modest, small data set, and I will have to use k-fold cross-validation. Now, what the k-fold cross-validation is, and what you see on the picture is a 5-fold cross-validation. So if you imagine, we will take the whole data set, and we are going to dedicate 20% of it for testing and validation, and the rest of the 80% we are going to dedicate to training the machine. That will be the first step. Then we are going to record the results, and we are going to do the second training on the new model, but using not the first, but second 20% for training and validation, and the rest of 80% for the training. And we will repeat this step. So this way, every single observation or patient in this data set will be used for testing at least once, well, exactly once, and 4 times for training. Given this is a small data set, I don't know how good my results are going to be. And my backup plan is using lights. So this is a special data set developed for linking investigations in trauma and emergency services. This is a multi-center data. It has 70,000 inpatients and 35,000 pre-hospital observations. There are some difficulties which will be a part of this data as well, and one of them is it's imbalanced data set. And the reason for that is we don't do transfusion on even half of the trauma patients. We do it in about 8 to 12%. So, and when the machine is learning, what it's trying to do, it's trying to minimize the error. So one of the interesting things I've done in my training is I was trying to train on a different data set, and the machine said, well, nobody needs a blood transfusion because the error is only 3%, and this is what you have in the data set. That's not exactly the answer we are looking for. So for the imbalanced data set, there are a couple of ways I can mitigate this challenge. And one of them is look at the actual data set and find out if I can do the same 2-to-1 matching between those who did not have the blood transfusion and those who did. And also using special metrics like sensitivity, specificity, precision rate, and the series operating characteristic curve. And I'm going to talk about those a little bit later. So, and next, what I'm planning to do is I'm planning to use visual data. And why do I want to use it? This is a study which came out about 2 years ago. And this is why I think injury pattern plays a role. What they have done is they looked at a couple of variables, and they were trying to determine on a pre-hospital stage if this patient needs a blood transfusion or doesn't need a blood transfusion. So they looked at the blood pressure, of course, everybody looks at the blood pressure, heart rate. They assigned, and most of the scoring tools, they assign a score. And they also looked at the truncal gunshot wound injury. So when they looked at the injury, they were trying to separate the chest into several different areas. And some of them, depending on the underlying structure, some of them are more prone to significant bleeding, some of them less. So not all chest gunshot wounds are the same. As they have done that, I was thinking injury pattern actually plays a significant role. And what I would try to do is I would like to use convolutional neural network to identify this information. What's the good thing about it? Well, It looks at the imaging data. It looks at the imaging data. It's capable to use X-ray data, and we have used the X-ray data in convolutional neural networks for chest X-rays during COVID. So we were able to identify those people who have COVID based on the chest X-ray data. That's before the PCR become available. How does it work? It uses steps called pooling and convolution. And what it does, it extracts, it looks at the picture, goes through it several times, and it extracts the features. And then based on those features, it gives you predictions. So for example, this picture, there is a 20% it looks like Donald, there is 10% it looks like Goofy, and 70% it looks like Tweety. CNN is not a new machine learning tool. It has been used before many times. So I'm planning to use it to do chest X-rays, pelvic X-rays, and if possible, CT of chest, abdomen, and pelvis. So because most of the significantly injured patients in trauma, they do get CAT scan. Lastly, I would like to look at the feasibility of using the time series. And time series have been used before, and the article below that shows prediction based on the time series for the traumatic brain injury outcome. How does it work? Well, the graph you are seeing here, that's the prediction over several years for the air travel demand. So as there are several protocols which use it, they look at the long term, short term, and what happens currently in the data. The green lines you are seeing, that's used for training, and the red lines are for prediction. You see the prediction are kind of a little bit off, but it kind of gives you that trend where it goes. I'm hoping to use it to predict systolic blood pressure and heart rate for the patients who are picked up by the ambulance from the time they are picked up to the time they are going to drop off the patient at the emergency department, because that will help us to find recognize patients who are going to be in shock by the time they get here, and also predicting the blood products in the blood bank. The data set I'm planning to use called Nemesis, and this is a very big data set. I received it, I downloaded it, I still have not tried to open it. It has 51 million of emergency activations points. My hope is it has enough of data for blood pressure and heart rate prediction. And the second is I would like to be able to predict the blood demand, and for that I would like to use the OHSU transfusion services data. What the article below tells us, they've been trying to use two different methods of prediction: the statistical lasso and LSTM, short-term memory cell. They came up with the prediction which improved their usage for the platelets. Platelets is the most expensive blood product, over $500 per unit. I hope I would be able to do the similar prediction for red blood cells, plasma, and other blood products. And my third specific aim is evaluation of the machine learning tools. What I'm planning to do is I'm planning to use sensitivity, which is also called recall rate, specificity, precision rate, and the receiver's operating characteristics. Now, how the receiver's operating characteristics work? So we are looking at the true positive, and they are the y-axis, and we are looking at the false positives. So in the ideal training, we should be ending up in the left upper corner. So that will give us the coverage for the 100%, everybody will be identified as true positive rate, and there will be no false positives. It's a wishful thinking, of course. The training I have done on a different database gave me area under the curve of 0.64, which is a little bit better than no skill classifier. And no skill classifier, it's the middle line which goes from the left lower to the right upper corner. It shows 50% of data covered correctly. And it's just as good as flipping the coin. What I definitely would like to avoid is worse than the no skill classifier scenario. What we will learn if this whole activity happens. So we will be able to use to learn which variables are important for the blood transfusion, for the decision making on the whether or not the patient needs the blood transfusion. I will be able to build few models and see if they work. And in the evaluation, I will be able to see how accurate they are. My timeline. So I have passed the IRB. I'm at the last portion of the qualitative part, and I'm planning next year to do prediction using the qualitative data, that's the multi-layer perceptron. Then next quarter doing time series, then using image prediction, and the last 6 months working on the dissertation. So if everything goes well, sometime about this time of the year, next year, I'll be doing the dissertation defense. There are more details if you are interested in the how I'm planning to do the which milestones I should pass to in order to do this research. So this is prediction based on the physiological parameters. Using the time series, imaging for prediction, and I also would like to say thank you to my family for supporting me through this process. Thank you. I'm ready for your questions. Cool.
So if I'm understanding what you're going to do is you're basically going to try to model the decision to administer blood.
Am I going to model the decision to administer blood? Yes and no. Because on one hand, yes, I'm trying to use the same data to predict if this patient will need a blood transfusion or not. But I'm also trying to augment the decision making. So if we are able to predict the blood pressure for the patient, blood pressure and heart rate for the patient who is picked up by an ambulance in a different town and being driven to us for 45 minutes, if I can predict whether or not their blood pressure going to be at a certain level, it will help the clinicians to make the decision.
So what you're saying is that an important element of this is the time at which these different variables are measured.
Yes.
And maybe you can help me.
Sure.
I don't know that much about these techniques. Why is machine learning the right way to do this, as opposed to some kind of time varying regression or a more conventional statistical?
So the question is why the machine learning is more appropriate than plain statistical review. Okay, good question. Thank you. Part of it is machine learning is able to find to use the not just simple regression correlation or multivariate regression to find out this, but it also takes into consideration and it learns on its own, trying to predict the outcome. It takes into consideration small variations in the data as they and small influences of one data point onto another data point, because it will be difficult to use simple prediction in multivariate prediction for predicting who needs a blood transfusion based on age and systolic blood pressure alone. But even that, you can see, we can't really rely just on the blood pressure. We have to take into consideration how much age has weight on it, and machine learning tools would be able to do that.
Another question.
Oscar.
How do you know that it would be valuable to give the blood sooner than when it was actually given for the patients in your data set? Because I'm hearing you say you kind of want to, you're interested in this time thing.
Yes.
And sort of early prediction. Is there some way you can tell from your data set that people got blood transfusions too late?
That's a very good question. So if there is any, so time matters, and the question you are asking, let me try to rephrase it. So how do I know if we gave the blood too soon?
Well, it's just that, is there value clinically
Is there a
in
value
giving the
clinically?
blood
Okay.
transfusion at an earlier time than what actually happened in your observational data set?
Okay. So is there a value in being able to predict if the patient needs blood transfusion? Is there a time value? That's the question. Okay, thank you. Yes, blood is usually stored frozen. So platelets live about, no? Not frozen, okay. Okay, fresh blood, okay. So we should be able to get the blood delivered from the blood bank to the emergency room where the patient is suffering from the bleeding before it's too late for the patient, so we can save the patient. That's the real value.
I have a question.
Sure.
It's actually just a flip side of the same question. How would you know from your data set that patient received unnecessary blood?
How would I know if the patient received unnecessary blood? This is a very good question. And honestly, I don't know unless we do the predictive model, which will tell us how much blood was patient supposed to get and compare it to the actual blood products given. But training for it, I might have to use the help of experts in the field, trying to, looking at every individual patient who machine identifies as too much or too little.
If I follow up, I have the same question, but you had a patient population to 600 transfused and then 1,200 non-transfused.
That's what I'm planning to use.
Right, so maybe like a non-transfused can see whether they have different, are they using the criteria strictly? Blood.
The criteria I'm going to be using is I'm going to match the data set, and I have to match them by certain criteria. One of them is injury severity score. So I'm looking at the two individuals who are equally severely injured, about the same age, about the same mechanism of injury, and one got the blood transfusion and one didn't. And I'm trying to find out what's the difference. Why?
I think that's kind of an answer that question, right? Because similar clinical condition but not transfused. And then the next question is the outcome, right?
Right.
Are they survive? Does also have a higher number surviving rate?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I also have a question. You have a patient having multiple transfusion, right? And the very trauma time is the systolic pressure. What about the later they are relatively stabilized? And at that time, probably hemoglobin become.
Yes, that's yeah. This is I'm looking at the patients who got blood transfusion in the trauma bay. So patients who are getting blood transfusion on the trauma wards, and I'm quite often do prescribe the blood transfusion there. They are outside of the scope of this study. So I'm typically because the prediction is very simple. If the hemoglobin falls below 7 and the hematocrit falls below 21, I'm going to do the blood transfusion if the patient is symptomatic at the same time, or if the patient is planning, if we are planning for the patient to go under the surgery and we expect a significant blood loss. And that's the machine learning tool which was developed before, so we can.
So you are now going to include all the follow. It's just that moment when they
Just that moment, because this is where I believe we are going to save most of the patients, those who would normally die within the first golden hour of trauma. Dr. Mohan?
So I think I find, Dave's comments really kind of interesting and intriguing about the potential for earlier transfusion of patients who need it in order to change mortality and morbidity. But also to me, the primary utility value of what you're doing appears to be a more mindful process of blood transfusion so that we're able to cut down some of the unnecessary blood transfusion that patients receive. So in order to achieve that, Mike, have you a sense of how you will change the behavior at the point of care? So let us assume that you implement this decision support. What do you see as changes in workflow, and what do you see as changes in outcomes with respect to utilization of blood transfusion?
So the question is, how would I change the behavior at the bedside in terms of the decision making for that to transfuse or not to transfuse? One of the articles I've read, it said it did a qualitative study of people who are making the blood transfusion decision. And one of the answers was, when you are transfusing, how do you decide how much do you transfuse? And one of the categories of answers was, I will never order less than 2 units of blood. So, and I think this accounts for the majority of the people who got at least 1 unit unnecessary. So I hope my machine learning tool will show if that second unit was unnecessary. Whether or not we will change the culture, I don't know. It takes a long time. Yeah.
But your question was kind of like, how can you actually implement this? If you come up with some kind of a prediction model.
How can I implement it? Well, my question is feasibility, whether or not it's feasible to develop such a tool, and I'm not planning to do the implementation. Thank you.
So if just to give a little bit of background on clinical, we provide to learn from clinical laboratory medicine. The timing, I would say that a couple of years ago, we didn't have this tool that number. We don't know patient exactly who they are. We couldn't issue blood. So that was a really huge burden to trauma surgeons. So they really cautioned everything having made a big blood, like mRNA, so we can issue on the working day. Then we don't have enough time to type this patient. Patient's not here. We don't know what ABC, and so there are areas that we can help. We know, this is how we work. And of course, if we know early enough, when we can make it blood warm up and get ready and get to the work. So that's the part of laboratories.
So, I'm just trying to think sort of practically.
Right.
These data are entered into the electronic health record. Now, there's probably some time lag in that. But I think what you're saying is that you could sort of develop some kind of prediction model based upon the data that gets entered into
Not only
the
data,
electronic health record, and then that would at least inform the blood bank.
right, and
If you've got high-risk patients coming in.
right, and then also the time we really get the blood to patient.
Yeah.
So maybe even just looking, you have the data from 17 to 2023. I think we implemented this fake medical record a couple of years ago. So you may even see the difference of those timing, and maybe there outcome, but I'm not sure I can answer this. You know, and even we issue to unit, whether they really always use our, we do have some blood return, that a policy how we use that, right? So maybe it's
Well, I mean, this is more of a question, I guess, for Juan, but also for Mike, which is, so you said that it takes time to type the blood and you don't have that information because the trauma patient's coming in.
Yeah.
Does that mean that that you're using a disproportionate amount of, say, O negative,
right, we try to give all.
right? And that's rare,
Yeah,
right?
we
And so-
can match, but even that we can't even give, so we need to document who we are giving. So now we got the medical record, we'll just give them, at least we know, you know, that's how we get that ready, work up, and get to the board. And then when patient right here, we already have stuff. So yeah, that's two.
That's why, to follow up that, I think the emergency like database, you know, you have that.
Nemesis.
So that may be very important data set for you, because I feel like just 2,000 data set from OHSU might not be sufficient. Because for clinical practice, maybe if you can use machine model using, you know, larger scale or something, just to see this, you know, gunshot wound or something on site, and then making a prediction based on the patient's age at that site.
Mhm.
Because, you know, during the en route, they may take 45 or something, but still they probably won't. I don't think the EMS will have giving blood or something. They were probably just doing some saline or something. So that would be really helpful to predict. You know what I mean? Because with your large data set with over the country, you know, those people, that age, that shot wound, that's their, you know, blood pressure. And then 45 minutes, they receive that, and the outcome is this patient survived or patient. So that will be in terms of blood bank, I feel that's very helpful. We can get heads up, hey, we might have an MTP coming up in an hour, something. And I just feel that that's gonna have practical, you know, and then down the road you can do the typing, yeah. So I feel like the more data you have will be, even you're just like pinpointing some simple, you know, systolic or blood pressure or something, that would be really helpful even for the surgeon.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, multi-center data usually has a little bit of drawback because it's a data heterogeneity. People have different practices at different sites. So, but the sheer size of it is very useful for the machine learning.
In terms of that, you can maybe, because of the variation in internal, like different multi-set, that's, you may also use your algorithm to just pinpoint those like simple things, because, you know, that probably will be more, you know, algorithm is prediction, but it's kind of may have some clinical indications. I don't know.
Yeah, it might. Thank you.
Are there any questions in chat? Steve, are you monitoring?
There are no chat questions, but if anyone on WebEx has questions, they should unmute themselves and ask them. Feel free to jump in or ask them in the chat and I'll be able to see.
Michael, I'll ask you one from the qualitative side. So you spoke to one of the needs for this research is there are multiple models out there now to predict the need for or the amount of blood transfusion, and those aren't being used in practice. You talked about a validation phase that you want to do at the end of your model to look at its sensitivity, specificity, receiver operating curve. Do you think you might be able to utilize your qualitative frame, those subjects that you had at the beginning, to help you identify the factors, to also help you give a validity check to, is this model any different than or better than the current models that you have right now? I get you're not going to work on the implementation, but might you be able to use that as part of your validation?
Well, yeah, this is a very good question. Thank you, Dr. Hexter. Yeah, I think I should be able to use some qualitative technique to compare the different algorithms and get some human response to that. That would be very useful.
Right. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in from our remote.
Okay. Awesome.
So,
Before anybody goes, the pizza that's supposed to be here at 11:30 is here now. Free breakfast.
That's the whole purpose to be here.
Wow, yeah. I guess there was a bridge up and the driver was stuck behind the bridge, so. If you feel free to grab plates and grab pizza and take it with you. At this point, I think the public part is completed. And the committee will just stay, so we'll give you